So it's been over a year now since I started doing these video discussions, and now I think there's like over 60 something that's posted on the YouTube channel, and obviously a lot of clips on LinkedIn. But today I'm actually really excited because a very good friend of mine, Tom Kirby, brought up an idea of talking to different leaders from companies that are either that have gone public or large private companies in order to understand the strategy and their mentality on leadership and vision. So Tom and I are doing this series, and I'm really excited also to have the first person be someone that I got to become really good friends with this year, Alan Johnson, and I'll have him explain his story. But the first and foremost, to introduce my co-host for this, because it's the first time I'm having one. Tom, if you want to introduce yourself and just give a little bit about your background, that'd be great.
Thanks for having me. I really love the opportunity to do this with you. I mean, you're a guy who I love to just talk about different people opportunities with. Think about how relationships and people and how you actually, team building. Those are things that we always talk about in the community. And so when it came time to this idea is, as a founder of a small startup, Prep, we're a finance and accounting collaboration software. I'm always interested in learning from different leaders and how their approach to building the business. And so that's where you and I just started bouncing ideas, and being the entrepreneur that you are, reached out to Alan, and we're really excited to have him with us today.
Just to be clear, he's too modest. This was Tom's idea. I'm just literally excited to do this with him. So he's too humble to admit something like that. So awesome.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. And then to introduce our first official guest of this series, I'll have him talk a little bit more about his background, but it's Alan Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Benny and Tom. Well, I guess I don't want to date myself, but I've been in the sort of entertainment business for about 30 years, but in very different capacities. Started off in the restaurant business, and then moved to the movie theater business, and then moved to the theme park business when I worked for Disney. Spent a brief time in fashion, although you wouldn't know it based on how I dress. Spent a brief time at the Gap, and then followed that up with a slightly different approach, which is to work for a private company when I became the CEO of BevMo, which is the largest specialty alcohol retailer in California. I was the CEO for that for 8 or so years. And then after that, ended up being the CEO of a public company here in Chicago. So but between sort of gigs at the moment, but enjoying life and loving the fact that we have our freedom back.
Amen to that.
Doesn't it feel so refreshing to have, face-to-face contact with people?
I mean, that was the thing. It's funny because the three of us were together last night, and it was just so much fun. I mean, this may sound out there, but to see someone and just give them a hug to like say, hey, oh my God, it's been so long, like I just felt good. So that could come off in the wrong way like these days, but I don't care. But anyways, thank you. And I think most of the people that are going to be seeing this is from Chicago, right? And when I first talked to you, when I saw that on your LinkedIn page, BevMo, I was like, what is this, right? And then I looked at the numbers, and I'm like, okay, so I never heard of this, but this is a pretty big company. And then the ironic thing is, my friends who are either from California or live in California or anywhere on the West Coast, when I asked them that question, I'm like, yeah, I actually talked to the former CEO of this company called BevMo. You guys heard of it? And it's like, what? Yeah, like it's just like natural to them, like, so because they understand it. So BevMo is very big in California, and what you did there was like unreal. So, and that was that's one of the main reasons why I was like, all right, I gotta have Alan. I want to have someone that the number one person would be someone that I have a ton of respect for, and so I appreciate you doing this. And for this series, we're gonna ask people the 3 questions that are basically the same questions but getting different perspectives. And I'm gonna have Tom kick it off and get started on it.
Yeah, Benny, thanks for introducing us. And I'd say the first question is with a great leader is understanding focus, right? I remember talking to somebody about my startup and being like, well, we're not big enough to do 6 different initiatives. And he smiled and looked back to me and goes, no company's big enough to do that. And so the first thing that I always am interested in understanding is why this, right? What are the mental models that you use to assess the challenges and the opportunities of your business and really focus on the ones that you're going to be driving after?
Wow. Yeah. Big question. And I'm interested that you actually used the term mental model. And look, running a business has never been easy, but boy, it's been made a lot more complicated with the nuances of the mental challenge. And so I'd caution to say that the thought that one size fits all is a very dangerous notion. And whilst I'm going to attempt to provide some framework, but it needs to be customized for the facts that you have, as opposed to the facts that you wish you had. And so that's the very first thing I think in today's challenging environment is, if you're the CEO, or you need to ask yourself an important question, which is, how do I show up as a leader? And it's interesting because you don't decide that at the beginning and then stick with it. It's an everyday challenge. And I can tell you firsthand that if you're not ready to pivot, then your outcome is not going to be a great one. And so some days you need to be a coach, and that works well. Other days, a servant leader. And then other situations, a commander, sort of a bit like the military, where you say, see that hill, see the tree on the right of that hill? That's the goal. That's what we charge. I know the cavalry don't argue, well, hang on, there's another hill to the left. Why don't we go there? And you need to, above all, be flexible. The next thing to think about is, particularly in today's world, but I believe this has always been the case, is be authentic. Benny, our good friend, Aaron Kroopwood, who runs a very successful authentic leadership session, would tell you that being authentic is one of the key critical factors to successful leadership. And you'll be found out pretty damn quick if you're not authentic. And, I've always felt that EQ beats IQ every single time. And emotional awareness as you're going through the challenges and opportunities of running a business are so critically important. So getting into the meat and potatoes, I guess there's one overwhelming thing that I think you need to understand to be a successful company, and that is a clear brand position. And there's kind of, the way I think about it, there's sort of 2 elements to it. The first is, are you clear about what you want to be famous for? And not enough companies spend enough time answering that question. Think about Blockbuster and Borders, 2 very good examples of, it's pretty obvious that they were very clear what they wanted to be famous for, right? The problem is that in addition to being famous for something, it has to be something that the consumer values a lot. And over time, what can happen is you're famous for it, but no one gives a damn about it anymore. And so, the one word that comes to mind is Netflix. They found a way to do the same thing, only different. And their timing was impeccable. So that's a good example of knowing what you're famous for, but being flexible, because that could change. I think another outstanding example of a company that really understands how to get it right and what to be famous for is Starbucks. They really understand that third place, right? There's home, there's work, and then there's this treasured sort of third place. And I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. And then the second element of a clear brand position is, do you really know and understand how you want the consumer to feel? Now, if we think about, let's say, Starbucks and Trader Joe's, wow, they really understand how they want their consumer to feel, right? I mean, it's a place that you walk into almost every day or a couple of times a week, and that's the habit that they want you to form. But they also know the special way that they want you to feel every single time that you visit. And that's the emotional connection. So when you are clear about what you're famous for, clear about how you want the consumer to feel, it's hard to imagine you being unsuccessful. And then the other thing that I think a lot of folks maybe make a mistake is the odd fact-based decision is probably worthwhile pursuing. And I think of this around sort of the cocoon of, are you clear about where you are today relative to your competition? I mean, there's almost no place where you can have a business that has no competition, right?
So
And
how
then
does that, how would that, like, how important is that? Like looking at your competition when you're figuring this out?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, if you offer nothing different than your competition, then you're just another flavor of vanilla, right? So that's not that handy. And what you want to do is, you know, when I said be famous for something, by the way, the most successful companies in the world are famous for one thing. You don't need 10 things. All you need is one. Imagine McDonald's without a Big Mac. Imagine Tesla without, you know, a car. Yeah, SpaceX and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, I think it is very important to know how you rank versus the competition, because the consumer is sitting there, you know, even if you take the most basic function of, hey, I feel like a cup of coffee. What's the name that comes to mind first? And whoever that is, the chances are that they will win the business. So relative to the competition is none of us operate in this, you know, silo. And then if you're clear about how you compare to your competition, is then make the decision of, you know, where do you want to play and how do you want to win? In other words, you're looking for as much white space as you can. And let's face it, there's not a lot of white space around, but there's still companies that thrive. And then, you know, your question had a second part to it, which was challenges for, I think you mean a successful business. So at the end of the day, there is a saying that if you're not growing, you're dying. So careful planning of profitable growth is critically important. And here, I think you need some facts also. And one of them is aligning around what are the must-haves that your business must have, otherwise go somewhere else where those things exist. And I'm constantly surprised how many businesses know what the must-haves are, but don't have them when they're expanding. So, you know, let's just take a simple example. I love the coffee business only because it's easy to get it straight in your head. You go, aren't there enough coffee shops? Well, if parking is very important and you go to a location that has no parking, but across the road there's parking, that is not the same, and not in our market. So that's a very good example of, you know, a must-have. Otherwise, go somewhere that does have. And then I think prioritizing your growth is critically important. Successful companies do this very well. And I like to say, sort of think like a franchisee. A franchisee says, look, can I get my money back in 4 to 5 years? And if I can't, then I'm going to go somewhere where I think I can. And then lastly, a successful business that deals with the realities of building the right culture and the right team, and above all, empowering that team to take action and execute. And if you have investors and board members, it's not a bad idea early to align with them, because it's heartbreaking to work for 6 months on something only to find out that you really weren't aligned with your investors and your board. So that's sort of a general roadmap, but as I caution, is respond to the facts that you have, not the facts that, you know, someone else has.
And that's very, very interesting. And if I had to distill that down for myself, is you first kind of broke it down into your personal leadership approach, right? And what I would actually summarize that is your inner game relative to your outer game, and understanding, you know, what makes you tick, what is your authentic self, and then thinking about who is this person right in front of me? Who is this other person that I'm dealing with, and what is the approach that's going to get them and motivate them to go off and achieve great things? And so then once we have that leadership approach, I could then like to sit there and think about what you then brought into your market and your go-to-market, right? Understanding what is your authentic, what is your business do? What is like that single thing, or what are those things that are you guys execute at the very best level, and how does that compare to the rest of the market? If that would be a good summary.
A fair assessment.
And then from there, it's understanding what is going to drive that enterprise value, focusing on that, and making sure that you have a culture that can go off and achieve that, right? Making sure that you have the people. I tell people every day, Prepped is a software business, but for as much as we're a software business, we're really just a people business, right?
Yeah.
That's all we are, is we're all about people. And so I think that is a very, very important thing, is understanding what is the culture that you're forming to actually get your people to get the best out of themselves and operate at the highest level as a team.
Absolutely.
So I think it's always helpful to just kind of sit there and think back and about like just those three pillars as you talk about, because with all those different things going on in a business every different day, it's just kind of taking that step back and reminding yourself of how we can keep it simple and evaluating, the opportunities with the business along those three segments. So no, really, really appreciate that perspective. Now I have to ask the franchisee and the coffee business and everything else that plays a little bit back on your background. So I love everything that kind of goes into that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no money tree, right? So at the end of the day, if every decision you make as if you were spending your own money, it just produces a better result.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's also funny too, when you brought up about culture and like, what do you get reminded for and what drives value? It maybe isn't necessarily what you always first comes to mind. The example I always use is CrossFit, right? They have this very, very healthy lifestyle, Whole30, paleo, and like they emphasize a lot of those things. And I remember at one point they really understood that what really got their members going wasn't just going to the gym and working out or that healthy lifestyle, but it was the community aspect.
Exactly.
Right. And so I would get, for as much as I would get a reminder of here's what your next workout would be, I get an email that says, hey, we're having a kegger for the Super Bowl. Right. And you're just like, what's going on here? But they understood that's what really brought their people coming back in every day. And so it's an awesome thing to kind of really understand that when your business gets to that level, what's going to really drive your customers and really drive your growth.
So yeah, I like that you brought up the community part, because I feel like that word is just used a lot, but because of the internet, because of technology, because of everything that we have going, even Netflix. I mean, there's a community element to Netflix, right? Because now you can see what other people are viewing, you can share accounts, you can do all that stuff, like almost every single thing. I mean, CrossFit is a perfect example. It's a lifestyle almost. Like I kind of joke around and say my friends who do CrossFit are like in a cult, because that's all they do. It's like they hang out with people, they do all that. So in this day and age, Alan, like what's your mentality on like how to actually build an organizational culture that's the right fit for the organization?